I grew up in a house where music was always important, though neither of my parents played instruments, but my father's main hobby was listening to music. He's a jazz enthusiast, and has been his whole life. And though my father never picked up an instrument, he is a deep listener and still is, and listened to music all the time and loved jazz and blues. So I grew up in a house where music was really important, you know, and we would go to shows in Ontario Place back when you could get in shows for free at Ontario Place or for the price of admission to the park. And, you know, he would take us to go see Count Basie, and I remember seeing Buddy Rich there, Oscar Peterson, Cleo Lane. You know, we'd go see a lot of, my mom liked Chuck Mangione. Went to see Chuck Mangione. You know, so, but, you know, music was just always important. And at some point at the age of 8, and I think this is, I've often wondered, like, why did I get obsessed with drums? I don't know why, but around the age of 8, I got really obsessed with drums. And I think it was because my next door neighbor was this guy named Carl Hughes. And Carl was a teenager. He would sometimes babysit my brother and I. I have a twin brother, by the way, named John. We're identical twins, who also plays music, though not professionally. And, but he had an incredible Ludwig drum set with like 2 double bass drums and tons of toms and stuff like that. So he was a super cool dude. And I think it was maybe him that made me interested in drums. But at the age of 8, I became obsessed with drums. And I remember my dad took me to Long McQuade, where I got like I remember having the Ludwig drum catalog from whatever year that was, probably 1971 or 72 or something, and just obsessively looking at all the drum sets and dreaming about owning a drum set and begging my parents to get me a drum set. And they bought me a set of bongos for Christmas when I was 8. And I played the shit out of those bongos. I played the bongos in the school band. Like, you know, I was super into the bongos, you know. And
were you happy to receive the bongos, or were you
disappointed I was happy to receive the
that
bongos.
It wasn't a drum kit?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was a little like, it's not a drum set, but, you know, the bongos that would do, you know. And I mean, my parents were like, let's see if he likes these before we spend hundreds of dollars on a drum kit, which I think was a wise decision. But I did, you know, I passionately played the bongos for a couple of years until I was 10. And then they bought me my first drum kit. And then I was just obsessed with playing drums after that, you know. And I at the age of 10, I just decided I'm going to practice for at least an hour every day. And I did. Though I didn't take lessons at first. I didn't start taking lessons till I was 12, because I had this idea that I was just going to figure it out myself and I was going to find my own voice, and I didn't really think I needed lessons. And I think my parents were like, you should probably have lessons, you know. And I'm glad they did, because it radically improved what I could do. You know, it hugely broadened my playing. And I remember I had to work at my dad's shop. My dad worked at Standard Autoglass in Hamilton, and where he was the manager there, and I had to go clean the shop or something and stick rear view mirrors on people's cars and stuff like that every couple of weeks to pay for my lessons. But that was a good thing to do. And that's basically how I started playing drums.
And how early on did you know you had something special to offer as a drummer, and that maybe this is something you'd like to pursue as a career?
I think I felt right away that this was something I could do, and I think I knew I wanted to do it for a living, probably from the age of 8. That this was where I wanted to go in my life. As far as having something special, I just thought I can do this and I can be good at this, and I know I can do this. I feel naturally inclined to this, and really with very little evidence, like very little. It's not like I sat down and played amazing stuff. I remember the first rhythm I remember being able to go do that, like make a gallop rhythm. That's pretty good. That's good enough, you know. So it didn't really take much for me to have confidence in what I was doing. And I think actually and there were a lot of times when that confidence was shaken. And there were a lot of times when I thought, maybe this belief I have in myself is not justified, you know. But I do think that having that sometimes unjustified confidence or belief in yourself is kind of the key ingredient to becoming a professional musician, or maybe a professional anything. And so I think I kind of had it from the get-go, even though I arguably shouldn't have. You know, like if somebody might look at that and go like, you know, okay, kid, look, but be realistic, like find some other interests where, you know, you can, you know, might be able to make a living someday, because, you know, being a musician is a very pie in the sky idea. But I never had any of that. I was just like, I'm going to do this. And so I sort of think it was there from the beginning.
Yeah, if you don't believe in yourself, who's going to believe in you, right? You gotta have that self-belief to push forward. If you and I were friends when you were 16 and you invited me over to your house to listen to some music, what records would you be spinning for me?
Well, at that point, at the time I was 16, I was fully immersed in punk and new wave, what we now call post-punk, but was not called post-punk at the time. It was just kind of punk and new wave. And when I was 14 or 15, is when I sort of discovered that. I remember when it first came along, I was super, before I got into punk and new wave, I was actually really into jazz and progressive rock. Actually, my very first musical love was Alice Cooper, which I discovered when I was 9, and I heard School's Out on the radio. And that blew my mind. And I remember I was with my cousins who were visiting from England, who were about 20 years old at the time. And I was like, who was that? Like, what is that music? You know, I just thought that song was so incredible, School's Out. And they said, it's Alice Cooper. And I said, who's she? And they laughed, you know, because, you know, the idea of a man with a woman's name at the age of 9 had not entered my head. And, but from there, so I was obsessed with Alice Cooper from the age of 9 to 11. And then I met this kid named Alan Okada, who was another drummer in the school I went to, who was actually, you know, I was talking about having your confidence shaken. Alan was a far better drummer than I was. Alan could play along with Emerson, Lake and Palmer records when he was 11. Like, so he could play extremely complex music note for note at the age of 11. And I was like, oh my God, I've got some practicing to do. And but we ended up being buds, and he introduced me to a lot of progressive rock music, like Yes and Genesis and ELP. So then I was obsessed with that from the age of 11 to 14, and also obsessed with jazz at that age from my dad. And so I was really into sort of technical music, and when I started taking lessons, so I started studying jazz while I was taking lessons. And then some friends and I, a different group of friends that I hung out with in high school, discovered, first of all, I think we discovered Elvis Costello, and then we went from there to the Sex Pistols, to the Clash, to the Buzzcocks, and Magazine, Public Image Limited. So during my teen years, when I was 16, that's what you would have heard. If you came to my house, I would have played you Gang of Four. I would have played you Magazine. I would have played you Public Image Limited. We would listen to The Clash. I was super into The Clash. Buzzcocks were probably my favorite band at the time. And so I was obsessed with the British new wave and punk at the age of 16.
Alice Cooper, the godfather of shock rock. And
yeah.
What's crazy is you see the image he has, and a lot of people don't know that he's an incredible songwriter. I believe he's written hits for like Celine Dion. He's got some songwriting credits you would never expect for Alice Cooper with his image.
His songs were incredible. His songs were great, and those records. I personally, for me, the early Alice Cooper records, like Love It to Death, Killer. And those records hold up. They're still amazing, you know. And I love that stuff. I still love that stuff.
So your friend, you make a friend who's an amazing drummer. Was that something that inspired you to be better, or did it kind of deflate you that there are levels to this game?
I think it did both. It did inspire me to be better. And we would do things like double drum solos together. And I think that was the part that was deflating, is that I remember, one girl saying to me, Alan was better than you,
How dare she?
And I was kind of like, oh, that hurts my feelings. But what the irony there is that I started taking lessons, and then years later, when Alan heard me play, after I took lessons, he felt discouraged and switched to guitar, which I think is really sad, because I think I know Alan subsequently went on to become the guitar player in King Cobb Steely, who were a notable 90s Toronto band who did pretty, they were an indie band, but they did well and toured Canada and stuff. And they were quite an influential band. So, he did, though he didn't pursue a career in music, he stayed in music and kept playing, and I believe he still plays drums. I haven't played drums in years, but I'd say that it was deflating, but because I knew that I wasn't going to stop playing drums, I just persisted, and which I think is the most important thing. It's like, you're always, because the thing is, there's always going to be people better than you, always, and but there's never going to be anybody who's more you than you. There's never going to be anybody who's better at being you than you. There's always going to be people who can play circles around you one way or another. There's going to be, but I'm the best Glenn Milchem in the world. But there's hundreds of drummers in Toronto that can probably play circles around me, technically in some ways, but they're not me. They don't do my thing, and I think that's what I came to realize. The beautiful thing about music, you can be competitive in music, but ultimately it's not a competition. It's not about competing. It's about finding your place. It's about finding out how you are, who you are, and being that artist as to the nth degree, and being the best that you can be. So, constantly trying to improve, constantly learning, constantly practicing, which, and trying to get better, but not worrying about that person can do this better than I can, or that person's got a better gig than me. It's like, what I've also learned, there's room for everybody. Everybody, if you're good at what you do, there's room for you. You will find a place. You don't have to worry, about this other person in town who seems to be getting all the gigs. It's fine. They're going to get their gigs. You're going to get your gigs. There's room for everybody. And you can all learn from each other and support each other.
You gave yourself a few moments for a pity party, but then you pulled yourself up and you allowed that to inspire you to become a better drummer.